Welcome back to episode 2 of Convos.dev. I'm Jess, and this is my co-host Chris. And today we're going to be talking about all things DevRel because we're both DevRel engineers at relatively small startups. I work at Warp, which is a CLI application startup that is now turning more into like the AI coding space.
Yeah, I work at Resend. We're an email developer for APIs. So anytime you need to embed email into your application, and we also have a marketing site as well, but anything related to email and especially developers, that's what Resend does well.
For full transparency, Chris knows a lot about Warp because he used to work with me at Warp. I do not know as much about Resend, which
Yeah.
I probably should admit at the beginning of the podcast before you find out like later on. But
No, that's just fine. That's
cool.
we get to all learn together then. That's great.
It's on my list. It's on my list. Do you want to kick off the discussion at all? Any thoughts about
Yeah.
DevRel? I think you're kind of newer to it, so I'm actually curious to like learn your thoughts over the past like what, 6 months has it been now?
Yeah, I don't even know. Maybe 8. It's somewhere around that zone. But
Yeah,
I think
wow.
DevRel is like a cool space right now because it's one of the few areas that like AI isn't threatening to replace. So I think that's nice. Like people still need to connect with individuals. And so ultimately, I kind of view my goal as internally in the team. Like I try to promote and like amplify people and what they're doing. So a lot of times I'm doing a lot of ghostwriting and trying to write for the team so that they can keep working on products and try to kind of take things that people have built and amplify it to the world. So internally, I kind of view myself as an amplifier. And then externally, a lot of it is just trying to meet people and talk to them and help them understand how best to, use Resend in their products. So that can be on, through blog posts or videos or conferences or anything where you get to actually interface with real people, even if it's async. So to me, like that's kind of what DevRel, like my role has been, is an internal amplifier and an external connector, I suppose. But yeah.
I like that a lot. I feel like that's so difficult sometimes. So, like, for
Yeah.
example, Warp engineers just did benchmarking for Warp. If I were to write a blog on that, I would know nothing. I would probably have to sit on an hour plus call with them to even understand, like, what they did. And at that point, it doesn't make sense for me to do it. It makes more sense for the engineer to talk about their experience doing it. So I'm curious, like, how do you catch up essentially with engineering knowledge?
Yeah, and I think kind of in the email space too, there's two areas that I lack expertise in. Like the actual email itself is like this weird black box that has a lot of strange archaic rules that are governed by Gmail and Yahoo and Outlook essentially. And then you also have the actual engineering that where we built out a product, and I'm not sure how we've implemented it without doing more research. So I think it kind of depends on the depth of the product. Sometimes it can just be as simple as like reading the RFC and figuring out, okay, here's the problem we were trying to solve. Here's how we solved it. And if the post itself is more of an introduction to it, then usually I can kind of take it from there. If it's a more technical deep dive, then I found that like either interviewing people from our team, or sometimes I'll just say like, here are the questions I have. Could you give me bullet points under each of these? And then I'll take those and then craft it into structure paragraphs, and then I pass it back to them for review. And sometimes I got it right, and sometimes they're like, no, that's not quite, it's not quite where we're at. So it kind of depends on the depth of the product and kind of where it stands in those two areas that aren't my expertise. Like how much is me and how much is me taking their words and trying to just smooth them out to kind of speed up the process for them while also, being able to be a genuine help to others.
I like that. That's actually a really good approach. What's an example of something technical that you've written for Resend recently?
So we
Curious.
implemented something called item potency keys on both our email and our batch endpoints. And like Stripe is probably famous for this. The idea is like you do an operation, like somebody checks out on your site, and when you do that operation, it's possible that that fails, and perhaps you have some retry logic that kicks in. Well, what you don't want to do is like have somebody who sends an email or who makes a purchase and then the retry logic fails. And so you try again, and then the
Yeah.
first one goes through suddenly. And so now they've purchased it twice or you've sent two emails. And so the idea of item potency keys is that you can attach this unique key identifier that's stored in cache for like 24 hours. And then can, whenever you do that action, and this case, sending an email, first checks against that. So there's a lot of like technical details, both around email itself, but mostly around just the technical implementation. And so that's one of those recent ones that I had never even heard the word before. The first time I saw the word, I was like,
Yeah.
what does this mean? And so now I can kind of say it in a real sentence. Not to brag on Jess, but like that was something, I think that one of the reasons your role hasn't been that simple is because you've kind of done everything at Warp in the last several years. And because you've worn so many hats, like I think you're in the perfect position to do that kind of connecting where you have a better view of what's going on from a bird's eye view. And you can kind of, you've touched all sections of marketing and growth and like a lot of the product as well. So like, I think you're kind of like the ideal person to me that I'm trying to emulate here. And most of that's because most of what I know about DevRel is probably from working with you and at Warp. So I think like that's the skill set that I've seen that's really valuable is being able to connect with people in the product more generally and kind of be the connector.
Damn. Okay, Chris is hyping me up way too much. Let me tell you my take on. So, mine is so complicated, my relationship with DevRel. And so I think I think I got lost for a little bit, and that's why. So I'll kind of talk about my thoughts now, which is that DevRel is like so many different roles, as anyone who's a DevRel probably knows. It's very easy, for example, to get relegated into simply marketing. So you can do like SEO work, you can do more marketing-y social media stuff, influencer marketing, which is more pure marketing, I'm gonna say. And then there's also a possibility for you to be very entrenched in product and engineering. So like simply writing technical blogs, like doing these like deep educational videos, documentation, which is kind of more in that. And then so that's more engineering. And then in the product realm, there's also places because DevRel is often talking and interfacing with a lot of people, or even like taking feedback from Twitter or something, or comments on social media. There's a lot of places, if you're respected, to bring that back to the product team and make that into physical changes. And again, it depends on how good your team is in moving quickly and having a mindset of wanting to do that. And then I've also just become convinced that like the title DevRel is like DevRel versus like, let's say, sales engineer, solutions engineer, technical writer, social media manager, influencer marketer. I think they're all kind of not the same thing, but if you get hired for that title, it's very likely you might be doing the same thing as any of these other roles, which is also like a thing I realize is like I wanted to be a DevRel engineer, but I didn't want to be a social media person. But then I realized that some points in my career, I was kind of just being a social media person. And so that was interesting to me. One of the reasons I would say it was difficult to be a DevRel at Warp as well, versus I'm going to say just looking at Resend, is like Resend is like there's an API layer, right? There's a place for extensibility to happen and for you to build even code snippets for examples of how to send a marketing email, like a password reset email or something like that. And it's not like you can't do that in Warp, but Warp is an application. It's not like an SDK layer, right? So I think
Yeah.
it's two separate products as well. So that was also a realization that the product that you work on affects what the company needs from you as a DevRel.
I'm curious what you would say to somebody who says, hey, like some of that seems interesting, but not all of it. How should I talk to a company if I'm wanting to get hired to make sure that it's like a good fit for me? Like, are there questions you wish you would have asked or things that like, as you've kind of gone through your journey at Warp, like you're like, okay, I've kind of found my spot now and here's why. And if I'd known that ahead of time, I probably would have asked these questions. Like, I'm just curious what you would recommend for people.
What I would specifically look for is how wrapped up engineering is with growth. So, for example, how well does the CEO or leadership understand the value of content? That's one thing. That's something that we've had to teach Zach actually a lot. And I'll say our previous head of growth failed in that attempt, and our current head of growth has succeeded. And I've realized how much difference that success made. Like Zach is now like wanting to allocate budget to this, or even wanting to film looms himself to send as demos to people that we're emailing, right? It's a huge difference when you have kind of leadership buy-in for content as a whole. And on top of that, like, you know, how willing our engineers wanting to get involved. Like you said, hey, you'll send questions to engineers. Like some engineers just want to bury their head in code. That's fine. Like that's
Yeah.
not a bad thing. But as a DevRel, your job is to kind of get them to do a little bit more. And so how much pushback are you going to get from that as well?
Yeah.
Is another thing.
Yeah, that culture is so important
Yeah.
because the last thing you want to do is be like the annoying person who's like, "Hey, I know you're actually working on product, but you know, I really need you to write this post for me." You know,
Yeah.
and so it
Dude,
needs to be kind of from the top.
yeah, the phrase, can you write a blog post for me? It's like, I just feel so bad. I feel so,
Yeah.
so bad, you know?
Excuse me, why I cringe and hit enter on this Slack message.
Yeah.
No, I think that's really wise. Like, and thinking about it from like the CEO down, is really important. I think I lucked out in that, Zeno, like we talked ahead of
Yeah.
time and like that's kind of his expertise in the past. So
Yep.
I already knew I had that buy-in. I think one question I would ask is like in the ideal role, obviously I might have to wear lots of different hats right now, but would you see this being on the continuum between like straight up marketer versus an educator? Like, where do you see this? That was a question I asked Zeno that was really helpful for me to be like, okay, is
I
this
like
a
that.
fit for me? And if it's like, well, really, ideally, this person would just be marketing the product. That might be you, but it might not be. And like, if that's what he had told me, I would have said like, probably not going to be a good fit. So I think that that's another question that has served me well, and I'm glad I asked. But I've still had to do a lot more marketing that I would typically want to do because right now you kind of have to wear all hats, and I'm fine doing that. A lot of times, what people mean by DevRel is usually either real heavy on the marketing or real heavy on the like be an educator, talk to people, like help explain it, like be technical. And so like depending on where you're at and what your comfort level is and the company you're at, like it can mean a whole lot of things because of that
Yeah.
continuum.
That's a good question. So like on a scale of 1 to 10, one being educator and 10 being like marketer, like give me like the number or something. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
That's a good question to ask.
Yeah. I think a
Yeah.
lot of that was coming out of my experience at work and a lot of the conversations we had actually had. Like that's what
Yeah.
generated that question for me. So I can thank you for
Yeah.
that. Do you want to move into some of our tools? I don't know what you have. I've been playing around with Dia, the new browser from the art
Oh
company.
man, I got the invite for it and I've wanted to sink time into it this 4th of July weekend. But I'm curious to hear your
Yeah.
thoughts.
I think right now it's like, I think it's too early um, for me to say like a whole lot just because right now it's basically just a browser that has a chat that you can interact with Windows on. So it's like, I can kind of already do that from a lot of other tools. Like I can just pass in URLs and say like, hey, I'm curious about all these things.
Give the audience like an example, give me an audience like example, like what's something that you've used it for, and then maybe one thing that was kind of actually helpful and one that wasn't actually helpful, just so I can
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah, so like I was writing a post on like validating inputs in a form. And so I was like, okay, like I could just go start myself and write down my thoughts, but it would be helpful to at least have like, okay, what are some areas I should cover? So I, pulled up maybe 8 or 10 articles of people I respect or, documentation that I was like, okay, yeah, this is kind of what I'm going for. And I had a pretty good idea where I wanted to go already. And so I just opened the chat and said, hey, Dia, like taking these tabs, and I just passed all the tabs to it. Like, I'd like you to identify like 7 major areas I need to cover in this article, along with a few technical examples, and then give me additional like links for each of these. And so then I just went and did my own thing, came back and it had like written out a decent amount and gave me like 50 links, or more. And so then I'm like, okay, well, that now I've got like my initial thoughts, some research, some people I already knew I trusted, and then additional things as well. So it was like a helpful jumping off point for me. So that's been a useful tool. As far as like what hasn't been super helpful so far is like more general purpose questions. Like there's no benefit to asking there versus in ChatGPT or Claude or somewhere else. They did just recently add this thing called skills where you can like have it code and something else. I forget what it is. That seems promising, but I've yet to really touch it. And honestly, if I'm going to use skills for coding, I'm going to use Warp or Cursor or something like that personally. So I'm not
Yeah.
sure how that would fit in my workflow, but right now at least it's like been a helpful jumping off point for research if I don't want to pull up ChatGPT and paste in 10 links.
Interesting. I like that. I'm gonna try it out this weekend. I think for me, it's the most helpful for calendar management.
Mm.
If it can do that successfully for me, like that would be a huge thing. So
I haven't
I'm gonna
tried
see
it,
if
so
it
you'll have to
can.
let me know.
Yeah. Should we move on to our, what do we call this segment? Show and tell. Show and tell.
Show and tell. Oh yeah.
Do you want to go first?
I already went first with Dia, so it's gonna have to be you.
Okay, I already texted Chris my show and tell for this episode, but I will play it
It's
on
pretty legit.
screen. This is not something I built, it's just experience, but I was able to play flag football with my women's travel team in the Dallas Cowboys training facility, like an indoor turf field. And we got to play against like different states, like Las Vegas, Denver. So Denver actually they brought their USA flag champion. Like her name is
Whoa.
Lacey. Like she's a league above everyone else. And also the team that she brought, like their slowest, shortest person, probably like taller than, half the people on our team. Their whole team was just tall, bulky, like strong. They won the whole thing. We
Wow.
actually scored, we were the only two teams that scored any points against them. We were very happy with that. And it was a very,
Yeah.
very cool experience.
Texas. There's a snap, dropping pressure coming up the middle. Lets it fly down the sideline. It's going to be picked off. Bringing it back.
Yeah, it was quite the video. So yeah, it's I don't have any cool experiences like that, unfortunately.
Oh, well,
That
Chris
sounds
just came back from running a whole week-long soccer camp.
That is true. Yeah, I did run a soccer camp for a bunch of kids. I took a week off. I do it every June, and had like 150 kids from 4 to 12, something like that. So it's a lot of fun. I also coach my daughters in the league too, so that was a lot of fun, but also very tiring.
Yeah. Is that your show and tell? Or do you
No,
want
I
to?
actually brought a show and tell that is inspired by
Oh.
my children and by my love of Liverpool Football Club. So I made a giant Lego man,
Oh, oh my
3D
God.
printed a giant
Wait,
Lego man.
you 3D printed that?
Very slowly, yes, over many hours. But yeah, he's completely, you can take him apart. I mean, I wouldn't recommend, but
Oh my
yep,
God.
one part at
Chris,
a time.
that's so cool. That's so cool.
Yeah.
You like one up to my Lego thing from last week.
And it wasn't intentional, but I did think about your Lego thing, and that's what made me think of this. So,
That's
yeah, I've got way
amazing.
too many 3D printed toys for my kids, and I figured I needed one as well. So, hey, well, thanks so much for joining us. We hope you really enjoyed this episode. This was a fun one to get to talk about what we do and a little bit about how you could also step into that same realm. But if you're interested in connecting with us personally, you can check out our socials in the description and let us know what you'd like us to cover next. We love talking about all things tech and anything nerdy, anything connected to the developer role. So thanks so much for watching along, and we'll see you in the next one.
See ya.